All right, hello everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is John Williams with Bautis Financial. And as you know, we're talking college costs today. This presentation will probably take, I'm shooting for 30, 35 minutes or so. I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna be moving pretty quickly. There's a lot of really great information in here I wanna make sure that I get to. I will say with that, if you miss something, if you're there taking notes, let it be known that we will have a recording of this available to you. We'll send that out to you once we're all finished. And also, there's this content you're seeing today will be one of two webinars we'll be putting together here, and then you'll see some information on the next one here in the next couple of weeks on college planning topics. But we also have started this hub called on our website, the College Planning Hub. You see the website here on the screen. It's our website /college-planning-hub. You're going to see time-sensitive content, key deadlines. It's going to be a great place for you to check in. And as we're rolling through this college planning season here, picking out schools, you're going to see a lot of really great content there. Just in case anyone bounces before the end here, has to bounce out, that I definitely highly recommend checking that out and keeping that and saving that that spot to check out some of that content. Also, if you have any questions at all or want to talk about your specific financial situations or anything at all, we're happy to help. No expectations there. You can email me directly at john@bautisfinancial.com. So with that said, let's jump right in. One of the reasons I imagine one of the reasons you're here today is like either you or somebody that you're close to is actually going to be attending, looking to be attending college, whether it be this year or a few years down the road. And as we sit here, a lot of us have been through this already. We have loans of our own. We know what the struggle is like. Some of us are still paying those loans, and we understand the pressure. And if we do have kids going through the same thing, we want to make sure that we position them as best we can. Obviously, it's no mystery that like we want the best for our kids, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can. But sometimes the idea of loans is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just we want to make sure that we put ourselves in the best position as if we are taking out loans or paying for college, that we have a great understanding. Some of these numbers are just insane, quite frankly, like $1.71 trillion in student loan debt. And the average student in 2019 had left college with an average of almost $30,000 of debt. So, again, we're trying to scare you just a little bit here, more just to kind of scare you into action. A lot of this is probably no mystery. And like I said, a lot of you have gone through it. And that's really why we're here today, is we want to help you make some great choices and give you some key points as to how to make sure that you're not overpaying. So ultimately, the problem is going to be this avoiding making some bad decisions, especially in this like pressure-filled time. I love when it saying the late stage college funding pressure cooker is what we're calling it. And what that is like, here you are. And if you do have a student, let's say you do have some student who is looking to attend college next year, there's going to be a lot of decisions that have to be made, a lot of things that have to be filled out. You're going to have applications, you're going to be visiting schools, and it can be a pressure-filled time, and so without the right information, you could be forced to quickly make some decisions that are really just not as educated as maybe they could be. And that's what really ultimately we're going to get to today and try to help you out with. I've already kind of hit on a lot of these points already, but there's going to be, and we're going to get to a lot of these as we roll through here. There's a lot of, really just these ideas around college that are just straight up wrong. And, they really sometimes are like involved with like forcing you into a decision. The most glaring one is going to be the hype around certain colleges. And again, I'll get to that. It doesn't mean that those certain colleges that have the hype, if you may, aren't good colleges, but we're going to show you how to compare apples to apples and really understand, what you may or may not be getting yourselves into around some of those schools, because they can be quite pricey. And it's just like looking at a lot of these these different like areas that might force you into some of these decisions that may or may not, are really at the end of the day, you can't really take back. And then obviously in the end, we want to make sure you're not overpaying. And what this really means for a lot of families sometimes is in those cases where you are forced to overpay, it can really put a lot of pressure on the household in general. If you're in a situation where you want your child to go to school and it's way more than you really wanted, you might be forced to look to your retirement funds. You might be forced to look to pull from your home equity. And then this kind of changes your overall plan in general. So we, of course, want to try to avoid that. So one of the questions we get in the beginning is like, what is really the first thing that we should be looking at? Like what's the one thing, that we should be thinking of when we're looking at cutting costs for college? Really it's expectations. I think one of the biggest times, and one of the times we see people making the mistakes the most, is when they're in a situation where the expectation of the parent and the child are just not in line. And a lot of times it really just kind of happens. And I'll get into an example, that might, I put that in, shed a little light on that. But as you can imagine, if you're in a situation where that your child wants to go to a certain school, you don't know how much it costs. You're not expecting to get them to get in, but they get in, and this can be a big surprise. There's going to be a lot of pressure in that expectation. So it's not that we don't want the student to be involved in the process. I mean, that's just obviously not the case at all. What we're looking at is really just setting those expectations in the beginning, like know what we're getting ourselves into, have those talks, understand what you can pay for. And if you're a student, understand what your parents can pay for and have those expectations. Because if there's a certain school that's just it's just not realistic at all, I don't want to say you shouldn't apply, but you really just have to know what you're getting into and maybe avoid some of those schools. With that said, there's some really great opportunities out there, amazing schools, and even some of these hype schools I'm talking about are actually just better because of the aid they are going to be offering, and some of the opportunities they're going to offer might be different from some of the other bigger name schools. But there's also some really great schools that maybe aren't as popular, but have unbelievable opportunities when it comes to aid and just great education opportunities as well. One of the things you want to avoid are and just really just take with a grain of salt are some of these reports that you see out there. They're based on some information that just might not be relevant to what you're looking for on an overall basis. And again, this just kind of contributes to some of that hype. So we're going to give you some ways as you're looking through some of these best colleges and US rankings, and some of the big takeaway here is to, I'm not saying don't look at them, but understand that just because this best colleges and the school that you're looking to is not on this list, I would take it with, a grain of salt, because it's not necessarily going to be based on what I would consider the things that you might want to rank when looking for schools. And so the news is filled with the rising price of college. There's no doubt. You hear it in the news all the time. And so the question is can I send my child to a good school at all without blowing my savings? Is this going to be just something that I have to come to terms with? And the answer is yes. I think the best news and the really the best news in this entire presentation is that the media does hype up the rising cost of college and the staggering amount of student loans, and those are all true. But it's important to detail that higher education is actually a buyer's market right now, despite all this news. And what I mean by that is the schools. So it just uses an example. Think of a great college that you've heard of, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much that. Let's use NYU as an example. NYU might cost $80,000 full price. But the fact of the matter is most students are not paying full price for the school. So, and actually the price cuts you can get from certain schools are a lot higher than most people realize. It's just a matter of finding which of those schools what schools, we need to consider. They're not all created equal when it comes to financial aid packages, merit aid. As you can see here, public universities, up to 60% of students don't pay full price, and private schools is even higher, 90% of those. Just a little bit of an idea of what that looks like is that the tuition of a school is of a public school is $45,000, the average tuition, discount being 60%. The real price is $18,000. So there are tons of opportunities out there. And the next question I usually get is like, well, why are these schools discounting so much? Like, is it like what's the deal? And really what it comes down to is admission directors and the pressure they're under. So like take one school, for instance, where there's like so many applicants and there's no way that school is ever going to miss their admissions. These admission directors are going to miss their goals versus like some other schools where they may or may not be falling short of their goals. Now, again, this is not indicative of whether or not these are good schools, and this is very much driven by a lot of this hype, and I'm going to get to a little bit later in the presentation as to how you can look at and what some of the things you can look at as to like what is under the hood as far as like what makes a good school. Like I said, you can compare apples to apples. But yeah, there's a lot of pressure from these admission directors to move to make some moves. So they know that you're not just applying to one college. They know you're applying to many. So they need to be competitive when it comes to these financial aid packages. So what are the key things to focus on in order to successfully navigate the college funding process? Now at this point you're wondering, okay, this all sounds great, and like I understand what you're saying, but like what does that look like? And the third key here is going to be what we're calling PEGs, or it's an acronym, obviously: price, expected family contribution, graduation rate, and starting salary. These are the four main things you're going to look at when you're evaluating a college and how you're going to put them on the list. And we're going to go through each of these here, starting here's all three of those, and just basically an overview of like what those are, as you can imagine. If those of you who don't understand what the expected family contribution is, we'll get to that. That's a really important one. Graduation rate, straightforward. And then the one I was talking to you about it, when I was saying earlier that like there's these great colleges and like whether or not they have like these really hyped names, a comparison may come down to just looking at how much the professors are being paid. Like what's the quality of the professors, and the amount of what the professors being paid versus how much you're paying for the college. And I'll get to that in a little bit more detail. So first is price, and that brings us to net price calculators. And if you haven't heard of what net price calculators are, they're ultimately going to be it's mandated it's a federal law. If the school is involved in the federal financial aid program, then they have to have a net price calculator on their website, access to that, so prospective students can go on there and learn a little bit more about what they might be paying or might pay at that school. Now that's basically every college. When it comes to being part of the federal financial aid program. So, but ultimately, what the net price calculator is going to give you an idea of what you would pay, could expect to pay to go to that school. Now, you can imagine how great this piece of information would be when you're searching around for schools. It's amazing that many will just actually, those who don't know about the net price calculators, just go into this decision and literally wait until the financial aid package comes back to them, and that can sometimes be received late. So it increases the pressure of making these choices down the road. So these net price calculators can be accessed early, and you have they're fairly accurate. I've seen numbers as high as like 95% accuracy. So they're not 100% accurate, but the really good ones are going to take very detailed information and actually formulate and they're created by the school, and the school knows what they're looking at, whether it be how much they expect the family to pay, and GPA scores. So when you do find these, eventually you're going to want to have some detailed information, because like I said, the really good ones are going to ask you about account information, how much money you have in non-retirement accounts, tax return information, and also student information like GPA scores, and so on and so forth. So definitely gather up some information there. And then you can use these to actually manipulate the data to see where, like, for instance, if you put in an income amount here, or if you put in a test score, let's say that in a student section, the particular calculator will ask what the SAT scores are. Certain schools that like put a heavy weight on SAT scores, you might see a change. So like, say, for instance, let's say your student scored 1100. If you can then go back into the calculator and put in, well, let's see what the package would be, the merit-based package would be if we put in 1200. And then you can see what the difference in the package would be. This, as an example, might help you understand whether or not the student should retake that exam again, the ACT or the SAT. So just an example of ways that you can go in there and just try to understand where these breakpoints are and how the college is looking at all the different information and formulating the packages. But ultimately, what you want to do is you want to use these calculators just to give you a better idea as before you visit the college, before, like I said, you get the hopes up, the student gets their hopes up around what they're what the school they're looking at, and as far as like whether you're going to be able to pay for it, this will give you a better idea. Like I said, every school must offer this. And a lot of times it's not easy. I just recommend doing a search, web search for net price calculators and the school name, and you should easily find it that way. They don't always have it. It's not always easy just to find on the website. And back to what I was saying is like there will be every net price calculator is not going to be created equal. And there actually is as an example, a federal template that's out there. So some of these schools that haven't either gotten around to refining their net price calculator, there is a net price calculator out there that's a federal template put together by the government that they can just put onto their website. And if it takes you less than a minute to fill out the net price calculator, then you probably should be aware that how accurate that information is. In fact, there's actually if you see this logo here, there's a good chance that this logo is on that federal template, and you can probably be assured that it's actually the federal template. Now, the template is designed to give you some information, right? But it's a blanket information. It's blanket information. It's not going to be very specific to that school. So just keep that in mind as well. This brings us to the E part of PEGS, which is the expected family contribution. Now, for those who don't understand what this is ultimately another calculation that you can do to find out what the financial aid applications will be expecting you to pay. This is a number that that is put together that would be based off of income and non-retirement assets, home equity, to understand what you can literally pay, could be expected to pay for a year of college. And every college is going to use this EFC, like the FAFSA that you are familiar with, that you would fill out. And by the way, you can start to fill that out on 10-1, which I'll get to in a second. They'll use this EFC number in a different way. So they'll get this EFC number and they'll kind of add their special sauce to it and understand, like, based off of some of these other key points I already talked about. But this is a great number. This is a number you can really just early on, like if you have a student in middle school, you can find out right now, based off of what your current situation is, what you could be expected to pay for a year of college. So you can start to understand what that is now. The net price calculators aren't as, they're really going to be based off of GPA, test scores. So they're not going to be as accurate until really just like a year out. But you do want to jump on those as early as possible. But this EFC number is the one that you can calculate pretty quickly. Already kind of went into what you could expect here. Just let me know if you have any questions there. We would be happy to figure out your EFC for you. If you wanted us to do that for you, just reach out to us. And there are, just as a second point, there are going to be two main EFC formulas. The main one is that FAFSA that I talked about. That's going to be the federal student aid application that I'm sure many of you have already heard about. There will be a similar type of application you fill out called the CSS profile that's used by 200 private colleges. And they basically just have a different way of formulating what that EFC number would be for their purposes. And like I was saying, October 1st is when you can actually fill out these the FAFSA and the CSS is when they first become available. I urge you to fill these out as early as possible. Their money does run out. So the earlier you can fill these out, the better, and you're gonna have the better. Schools run out of their own money. So like the sooner you fill this out, the sooner the federal program will look at your application, see if there's any grants available, and also the schools in the states looking at that EFC number, and the sooner they get it, the sooner they're going to be able to consider you for their own financial aid. This number that you get is going to be, as you can imagine, is going to be based heavily on income. So like you could get an EFC number of 0 being the lowest, you could get a really higher number. And in those cases, when that number is higher than what the actual tuition is at the school, it's most likely going to be an unfavorable situation. And when it comes to need-based aid, and in those situations, you look towards merit-based aid, which I'll get to in a second. But just as like I already mentioned, you could start as early as possible on this EFC number, just to kind of understand where you're at, so you can make some adjustments and really kind of set the expectations early. But just as you can imagine, like I said, you will have these different swings when it comes to the AGI, where they're basically going to be taking the AGI from your tax your tax filing, your adjusted gross income. They'll use that number, any investments that you have. And this is in this example, this middle class family here, you can see those numbers will reach a federal a parent's contribution of $2,500. And then just to compare that to obviously if there's a school in this situation, you're only expected to pay $2,500. In this example, and you're looking at a private college costing $60,000. The school is going to basically see like your need is $57,000. It doesn't mean they're going to give you all of that. In some cases, schools do, and I'll get to that in a second. But it doesn't mean that you're going to get all that. But you're going to be heavily considered for financial aid from the school, and maybe even from the government as well. On the other end of the spectrum, if there's much higher numbers, as you can imagine, like this number is going to put out a much higher number. So in that same case, where if you're expected to pay $34,000, your need is now going to be in the $25,000 range. Financial need is going to be in that $25,000 range. So it just puts you on a different range, and you're obviously going to have a lower consideration for need-based aid in that situation. And I will say that there are the number does swing down. So the same when you have a second child in college, so that number does come down. It's not exactly cut in half, but in this situation, you do have about $17,000, $18,000 of an EFC. And then this is an example where the EFC is really high, as you can imagine. It's over the price of college. So like that college is going to get this and say, all right, well, they don't have any need for financial aid, and they're probably going to pass over your opportunity to get financial package from the school. And in those cases, like I said, we'll direct you towards the schools that are going to offer merit-based aid more readily. And and this is just kind of just shows like the example of, like when we're looking at in the AFC, like this financial, the difference here in this example is going to be, each school is going to have like a different cutoff. So like, for instance, if there's $23,000 of financial need, at one school, you might get anything. At other schools, you might get half of it. Another school, you might get all of it. So it's really important to understand the actual school and how they're going to approach it as well. So some strategies when it comes to the EFC, I think the best one is file early, understand what the EFC number is, and do it early and often, apply for the FAFSA early, and just have a really good understanding of what that AFC number is. And then you can use that number to kind of look at different schools. A lot of the really good net price calculators are really kind of using they're very much like filling out an expected family contribution, in the sense they're going to ask for your AGI, they're going to ask for your income, and they're going to formulate almost the FC within the net price calculator. So they go hand in hand. It'll give you an idea as to like how each college is going to look at the AFC and take into consideration what your need is. And like I said already, like if you have a large expected family contribution for more affluent families, we're going to like try to avoid universities that provide no merit scholarships. If we're looking to cut prices, just because obviously in that case, there would be no opportunity for any scholarships or any aid at all. Can't say this enough. Go early. Make sure you understand what your target is. We're going to kind of roll into that. It kind of like this segues us into looking at the actual school itself. So like the graduation rate, is going to be a big one when it comes to looking at these different schools. A perfect example is if, as you can imagine, if you're looking at 4 years of college and you compare that to another 4 years of college, and one is more expensive than the other. Well, if in the former example, the student ends up going for 5 years, then obviously it's going to be a lot more expensive. So adding another year, and some of these schools just have higher graduation, how long they're at the school, and have different graduation rates when it comes to 4 years and how long they're graduating. The other consideration here is obviously we don't go into this and expect that the student's not going to graduate, but it should be taken under consideration. But I also think it speaks to like how it's hard to say exactly why or how, but like I really feel like the environment at the college and what the college might be providing as far as services are concerned, or the teachers' level of involvement with the students really lends itself to the student enjoying themselves there, and really embracing the college experience. And I do think that does translate into some of these graduation rates. Way for you to kind of a resource for you to check out is this online. You can just Google college completion. You're going to find a bunch of different resources out there. And this one, college results online, is one of them. And you should be able to search and kind of compare colleges. Here's an example of one looking at 4, 5, and 6 year graduation rates, and Princeton being the example you're seeing here. And then you compare that to, and they're pretty high. I mean, 88% is pretty high, but you compare that to, let's say, San Diego State University, they're significantly lower, and they're higher for 6 years, but that's an extra 2 years of college, and it's not free, obviously. And then this brings us to salary, which is the last part of this. The salary is going to really just kind of be like this gauge as to how much is looking at how much the university is paying the teachers. It's not a foolproof way of understanding how good the teachers are, but if let's be honest, like if they're paying the teachers more, you're getting more for your money, first of all. So like if the price of the college is the same, and one college is paying $50,000 and the other is paying $80,000, it's a real value to, to look at, and real dollars that you can compare and say, all right, well, I'm paying $50,000 for this school, and they're only paying the teachers $80,000 or $50,000 versus this other school. So it is some really good data to consider when you're looking at, like the actual quality of the school. And you can research this online as well. And there's a bunch, once you get searching online, and you do some Google searches, you're going to find some really great resources out there. This one's called Educate to Career, and you'll be able to actually look at each of the schools and find out some data on how much the university is paying their teachers. Now, there's just a quick example on this. The New Jersey Institute of Technology, versus a high profile school like Drexel University. We'll look at those. So you're going to have the New Jersey Institute of Technology, $33,000 a year. Drexel upwards of $55,000 as far as tuition is concerned. Now let's look at the starting salary for some of the different departments, as you're seeing here. But I think you'll have a total or an average at the bottom, and you'll get a feel for how much each school is paying what Drexel University is paying their teachers. And then here you're going to see that you're not seeing a whole lot of a difference. This is in the New Jersey Institute of Technology, but you're paying $22,000 more. Now, I don't mean to pick on Drexel, but it's just an example. Like Drexel could have other things that are going on that you really, really like. But, when it comes to the quality of the teacher and the quality of the teacher that's actually going to be, if you're looking at how much the teacher is being paid, and like I said, I do want to tread lightly. It doesn't mean like 100% that they're going to be the same exact level of like type of teacher, but they're going to be pretty darn close. And it's a great way to kind of look at the comparison. And really this comes down to return on investment. You're paying this much for the school, and this is a big, there's other things at the school like the campus. There's other overhead that comes into play for sure. But as you can imagine, what the university is paying the teachers and the professors is a big part of their overhead. So like, it's a true ROI comparison. Now the idea behind this qualifying for financial aid and like, how does that fit into to grants and all the other money sources is one of the biggest things we get asked. Like, all right, so if I have too much money, like saved up, is it going to be bad for qualifying for aid? Or how do the grants that the student is awarded, whether it be from the state or private grants, private scholarships, or because the schools are going to look at all your money and look at the big picture. So if you do get some grants, you do get some other scholarships, they're going to take that into consideration. So will the student qualify for aid? And obviously the net price calculator really kind of gives you a good idea here, but it's the number one question that we get. Will they actually qualify for aid, and how do all these things affect the big picture? And there's gonna be 4 different ways to look at like paying other than like out of pocket. There's gonna be your grants, which is typically going to be federal. There are some state grants. There's the most popular one is going to be called the Pell Grant. There's scholarships awarded from the schools. Of course, loans. There is going to be subsidized, unsubsidized, which I'll get to in a second, and other borrowing options. So these are going to be like all your different areas of at the end of the day, you're going to be looking at when looking at how to pay the full bill, including out of pocket. Grants are one of the forms that don't need to be repaid. So the Pell Grant is going to be need based. So it's very much going to be based on the household income, and it's upwards of $6,500. And it's really the main one that you're going to see. There are a couple other smaller ones, and at the state level, which I'll get to in a second. scholarships, merit, it's going to be merit based, like I have already gotten to, need based. These don't need to be repaid. So obviously great to have those, as many of those as possible. And that's why what we're talking about here is going to be, very much surrounded around increasing the amount of scholarships, merit, and need-based aid, and as well as those grants are concerned. And then when there is a need to pay for school with a loan, you do have these the federal direct loans, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with if you had student loans. There's two versions: or subsidized, unsubsidized. The direct subsidized loan is going to be based off of needs. So if there's a need for the student, then as far as like financial need, the government will subsidize the interest during school. And then the direct unsubsidized version is really there's really no limit on that. Like you can really just borrow the difference, but you are going to need to pay the interest after you graduate, and it will actually compile and throughout school. So those are the two different loans there. And then there's also going to be some opportunities for parents. The direct plus loan is going to be a program, is going to be an opportunity for parents to take loans out as well. Other options, a lot of times they say we try to avoid this, is like tapping into anything that you really didn't plan on tapping into, like home equity. If you had a plan to pay off the house early, this can really put a stress on that. And there are some private loan opportunities out there as well, if you have a really good credit. This is what the breakdown is. So the two highest ways, other than out of pocket, that are sources of scholarships and grants, are going to be the college itself, granting merit-based or need-based aid, and the federal government offering Pell Grants. And then obviously state governments and private scholarships file in behind that. The federal aid program is going to be very much, like I said, the grants, loans, and there are going to be some certain tax credits. And then when it comes to state, I kind of hit on that, so I'll go through that. But the state sources of money, every state is going to be different. So they're going to have their different programs. So I encourage you. They're not, I'm gonna be honest with you, they're not always super aggressive, but I definitely recommend popping on there, taking a look, see what you can find, see if there's anything that might be relevant to you. But they are going to be different from state to state, quite different actually. And then the in-state schools are always, and I'm sure many people have heard this before, are always going to be cheapest. When you're in the state, and definitely consider some of these schools that are, out of state schools. State schools are going to be much higher, just because it's really, just think about it. The state school wants to take care of their own, so like you're going to have much better opportunities. You have lower tuition and much better opportunities when it comes to aid. But there is a lot of competition. So there is going to be a lot of merit-based aid. And there's going to be a lot of competition between some of these schools that are out there. And that's something you're going to want to consider, especially when you're looking at these these really, really popular names that are out there. When it comes to like your UCLAs, your Berkeleys, your Michigans, they don't need to worry about attracting students. It's just the fact of the matter. Ivy League schools, it's just not going to be a great opportunity to look for merit scholarships. You think Ivy League and you hear people saying, "Oh, I got a full ride to Harvard." It's not realistic, because there's just so many affluent students going to those schools. So definitely do your research on that and understand what you're looking at there. And that's going to reflect quite a bit in understanding, the school itself and what they're going to offer, and the net price calculators that we already got to. And if you won't qualify for any need-based aid, you really want to, like I already mentioned, you really want to apply to colleges from, that are going to be offering this merit-based aid. And you want again, you want to really consider like the hype around the college. You want to consider like what, some of that pegs, and really try to come up with a list of schools that are going to be realistic if you are looking for some financial aid. And with that said, like these are some of those schools, in some of these elite schools, but some of the schools you see on here, actually, believe it or not, the hardest part is getting into, because a lot of these schools, actually, at the end of the day, if you do have need-based aid, there are some schools, a need for financial aid, then many of these schools are going to actually meet 100% of your need. So Yale being an example, they actually, so if you get in, they're going to, and you have a need, they're going to meet 100% of the need. Now, granted, a lot of these schools are very hard to get into, but that goes back to that, the idea of, a guy I knew who's like, they had this stretch school was NYU. It's like, let's just apply just to see what happens without really knowing what they're getting themselves into. Like a really popular name of a school. Now, all of a sudden, they get in, and you're like, oh, like now what do I do? I can't tell my kid they can't go to this. But with that said, there are schools like NYU that are these high profile names. So if you're going to have those, like those, what do you call them? Like, pie in the sky type schools, make sure you understand what and you apply for them. And there's an expectation there that you understand what you're getting yourselves into as far as the meeting the need. And a great way to actually get this information, I already mentioned Yale is going to be on the there's going to be a lot of really great sources out there. This College Board is website. Just search College Board, college planning. You'll eventually find this College Board site, and they'll have really just what the financial aid packages are going to be offering on a yearly basis. They compile this information so you can go on there and understand, okay, what has the school been giving as far as merit-based aid, meeting the need of those who have a need for financial aid. You go to the this paying tab here, and it's going to give you all this really great information. Again, here's the Yale tab on their paying tab, and you can see here had full need met. So if you were a student that went to let's say you couldn't meet the let's say $60,000 roughly, and you could only, your AFC was only $10,000 and you had a $50,000 need. If you get in, they're going to give you the $50,000 more or less. Now, on the other hand, you're going to look at NYU, and not to pick on NYU again, but they get 12% of that need base. So, in that case, there's so many affluent students, families that are sending their kids there that and there's so many kids applying that they don't need to, they really just don't need to meet the need because so many are paying full price. And there's also going to be those schools like NYU who are offering a whole lot of merit scholarships as well. But then here's another example, like when it comes to, need-based aid versus merit-based aid, where here you have a school where like like a little higher full need was met, but you can see the merit-based aid is on the higher end. So there's going to be an opportunity there that you're going to look for is if you are on the higher end of the scale when it comes to income as a family. And then the other thing too is going to be private scholarships is one of these things you're going to consider. Like you can do searches, like a lot of big companies have them, certain families have started, based off of, usually personal reasons, a scholarship, and you really just search those, but keep in mind that they will be, they will affect, and you have to report those scholarships, and they will affect your aid package when you're applying for certain schools. Now, there's a ton of information, I know it, and like I said before, if you have any questions, I'm going to give you a second here to open up questions here in a second, but it's a lot of information. We're here. We love answering any questions you have. Reach out to me directly. If you want to set up a consultation, we'd be happy to do that as well. No charge there, of course. at the end of the day, you know, we really want to make sure we're taking the pressure off and offering whatever resources we have, as many resources as we can to kind of help make this late stage planning as easy as possible and help you avoid any of those mistakes. And that leads me to the end here. Like I said in the beginning, my email is john@bautisfinancial.com if you have any questions. And definitely check out our college planning hub at bautisfinancial.com/college-planning-hub. And you'll see tons of great content as we roll through and continue on through this planning season. So, all right. So at this time, Kira, you still with me here? Any questions that you?
Yeah, I'm here. There is one question. You did address it, but if you could just reiterate, if we don't qualify for need-based financial aid, do you still recommend filling out the FAFSA anyway?
Yeah. So when it comes to the FAFSA, I mean, the beauty of it is there's really like even affluent families, like I say, fill it out. You just never know. And you definitely the CSS profile. You know, I highly recommend early and often, no matter what your situation, just fill it out. Once you start searching around out there, you're going to see there's tons of schools that are offering a lot of money, and it's not just because necessarily because you're of just 100% of your financial situations, because of that competitive nature that's out there right now. So I guess that's the long answer to saying yes, definitely apply.
Awesome. Thank you. That's the only question we have in the chat today.
Excellent. Well, like I said, there's gonna be a recording on it. We'll send out this recording. And if you know, you want to miss something or it was moving too fast, you can certainly listen again. And certainly reach out to us. Thank you for joining us, and keep an eye open for our next webinar here in the next couple of weeks. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.